Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the annual Global Solidarity Conference from Hub Cymru Africa. Once again, we're joining each other online. I know lots of us have got a strong desire to get to actually see people again, but we're hoping we've made the most of the benefits of online working, and we've brought you speakers from all over Wales, the UK, and most importantly, Africa. I'm Claire, I'm head of Hub Cymru Africa, the partnership. We're a partnership made up of 4 organisations. For those of you that don't know, our partners are the Welsh Centre for International Affairs, Fairtrade Wales, Wales and Africa Health Links Network, and the Sub-Saharan African Advisory Panel. There's many of us joining the sessions throughout the next 2 days, and there is a table specifically dedicated to Hub Cymru Africa in the social lounge, where you can go and check in with our staff, find out what work programmes we're up to at the moment, and have general discussions, because I know we do miss the opportunities to have those informal chats in the lunch or the coffee queue. As usual, we operate a safe or a brave space for people participating in our conference. We like challenge, we like debate, we think it gives us good ideas and it drives improvement in our work. But what we really want is respect for people's experiences. They're not up for debate. If you feel uncomfortable at any point, please let any of us know. We're here to support you, but we hope we're going to have a positive and productive couple of days. For those of you who've looked at the programme already, you will have seen that we're having 2 different days. So day 1 is focusing on solidarity, which we'll talk more about at the next session. It's a concept that most of us are familiar with. The sector in Wales prides itself on working in solidarity, but every now and again it's good to think about what solidarity is as a verb and reflect on how we act in solidarity. The last 2 years have been incredibly turbulent for the sector. We've had COVID, we've had cuts to funding, we've experienced the very real of the Black Lives Matter movement and what that means for the people that participate in our work and how we can do better to support them. And obviously we haven't been able to be in touch with our partners like we've been able to in the past. So we just want to check in, consolidate, learn and move forward positively, thinking about what we've learned in the last 2 years. Day 2 of the conference is going to focus very much on arts and culture. We know from all of our previous conferences that arts and culture are something the sector really care about, and we know it's also a good mechanism with which to build solidarity, and we know lots of groups want to be primed to be able to work in that space and build connections in those areas. We've had a good couple of years at Hub Cymru Africa, which you'll hear more about over the next couple of days. We are currently funded by Welsh Government. We have income from the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office to fund our Small Charities Challenge Fund project, which many of you will be involved in as part of our clusters. We've recently succeeded in getting funding to deliver a Waterloo Foundation programme, which will be about digital development and how we can better work on partnerships internationally using digital tools and platforms. So I guess Air Meet is a trial run of that today. So I'm going to slowly begin in vain and introduce our first speaker, who is Karimi Kinoti, who is currently Interim Director of Policy, Public Affairs and Campaigns at Christian Aid. Christian Aid, a remarkable organisation who have done really brilliant things working across the UK and Africa. Karimi is based in Nairobi at the moment, and she was previously, I think, head of programs in Africa or director of Africa, but obviously Karimi will give much more information. She's going to talk to us, and then there are going to be opportunities for questions and answers at the end of her session. So please feel free to pop your questions into the question box and I will field them afterwards. So we're very grateful for you joining us today, Karimi, and to kick off our conference. We're delighted to have you with us. and looking forward to hearing about more of the leadership that Christian Aid have demonstrated in solidarity. I'm going to potentially disappear from the stage, so you have it to yourself, but I'll be in the background to support, because we fully expect to have plenty of mishaps and digital problems across the course of the next 2 days, because that's modern life. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Claire, for this invitation, and it's a great pleasure to be with you all this morning. I have, only recently got to hear about Hub Cymru, Africa, looking at the chat and just the names, the places where people, certainly in Africa, are coming from. Really, really good and excited to be part of this dialogue. And similarly, for those of you in Wales and probably broader UK, great to really have this conversation with you today. As mentioned, I am the Interim Director of Policy, Public Affairs and Campaigns. It is a global position. It is one of the areas, advocacy and campaigning is one of the areas of work that Christian Aid is well known for, as part of our vision of holding to account those systems, those structures, those ways of working that keep a vast majority of people across the globe, including Africa, in spaces or experiences of inequality, of poverty, and we'll come to that in a bit. I know that I have a colleague of mine, Marie McNeil, on the call. She is head of of Christian Aid Wales, and for anyone who's interested in learning more about what we do or how you could plug in with some of the work that we are doing in Wales, please feel free to contact Marie. Probably she will put her details on the chat for you to reach out. In Wales, we do work with many sponsoring churches. So Christian Aid is an international development organization sponsored by 41 churches in Britain and Ireland. And so in partnership with individual churches, with hundreds of volunteers, with schools, with politicians, with civil society, we all work to build relationships that work to end poverty. We believe as Christian Aid that poverty can end. Now, this invitation, I was very interested in the theme. I think it's quite relevant, of global solidarity and reframing the narrative around aid in the context of the COVID pandemic, the context of the climate crisis, and the calls by the Black Lives Matter, among others, to decolonize the international aid industry. And hopefully at some point, whether on this call or in another occasion, would be good to learn over the 2 years with the Reframing the Narrative project, what has challenged you the most in your partnership as organizations in Wales and organizations in Africa? What is it that you need to unlearn? And what might you need to learn afresh or new, or learn to relearn in order to engage from a standpoint of genuine solidarity, respect, and healing? So in this period, with decolonizing aid, one of the areas that has been challenged is values and knowledge systems that, if you like, emanate and dominate the areas of development that in many ways almost neglects and diminishes, almost makes invisible knowledge systems and ways of doing development, ways of community that come from the global south, including Africa. It challenges us around how we see ourselves as human beings. Are we equal? Is there a hierarchy when it comes to ethnicities, or hierarchy when it comes particularly to race? How do we value local and indigenous knowledge, ways of being, and ways of knowing? Are there implicit or unconscious bias? Maybe because we don't know any better, or we just simply privilege, particularly Western knowledge and values and understanding of what development means, while stereotyping what may be good for those in the global south, and in this case, in Africa. And a big contention around the assumptions, the images, which narratives, pictures that tell stories of people in the global south as helpless, as dependent on others, as people without agency and in need of sympathy and charity, which reinforces the white savior mentality or syndrome. One of the political leaders in Africa who has been very strong in seeking a different relationship between Africa and the global north, and here of course we can include the United Kingdom, is the President of Ghana, His Excellency Nana Akufo-Addo, who says, "Trade, not aid. Africa beyond aid," and seeks to rally the continent as well as the wider global community for a partnership that serves Africa's interests and enables it to stand on its own feet. A relationship of true solidarity and mutuality between peoples across the globe. For those of us who may pay attention to international affairs, we know that the global economic system and financial architecture is actually rigged against the economic freedom and prosperity of the African people, the African continent, who are strangled and literally shackled in debt, denied of revenues, particularly by the multinational corporations, through illicit financial flows and other tax regimes that deny the continent billions of dollars that could be used for public services such as education, healthcare, for infrastructure, and other things, areas that governments should be providing for their people, their citizens who pay taxes and are highly taxed, by the way, whether that is income tax for the few that earn income, that earn a living through employment, but also all manner of taxes, high value-added taxes for goods and services, etc., etc. But that is not enough. The domestic revenue, the domestic taxes from governments, that governments, the few that governments are able to generate, not enough for the needs of providing public services to citizens. And a lot of that actually first goes to paying debts that in some ways they took without much thought about how to repay, and got into a vicious cycle that gets us into this shackles that would take generations to get out of. But there are also trade routes. How do we trade internationally in ways that move Africa from being at the bottom of the value chain? We know that the continent of Africa is not poor. It's very well endowed in resources, which for the most part have not benefited its people or placed the continent on the trajectory of achieving the aspirations of the Pan-African vision, commonly called the Agenda 2063. So looking at Africa in the year 2063, and the vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful continent driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. I'm curious to know what global solidarity means to you individually, means to you as a community of people. Personally, I envision that it starts with a change of mindset. A mindset around abundance rather than scarcity. We know that the scarcity mindset that has driven the economic system for several centuries has been one about the hierarchy of races or ethnicities, around patriarchy, around greed, selfishness, power, privilege, short-sightedness, irresponsibility, especially when it comes to creation and the environment, as if the planetary boundaries, so the way in which the planet replenishes itself, could keep going on with a model that does not replenish, does not think into the future. And to turn the table, to think differently, that there is actually enough for everyone. We can share resources. We all have a right, the billions of people in the world have the right, each and every one of those currently living and yet to be born, have the right to live to the full, free from poverty, from injustice, from exclusion, where we can celebrate our diversity and steward the environment with a generational perspective in mind. It's not about me, mine, here, now, but looking into the future, one of sharing a cake that we can all celebrate together with all that life brings. So it's not overabundance for some and complete struggle for others, women and others in households waking up in the morning and not knowing how to feed their children. That day, or even that morning, not knowing where their next meal is coming from. Not praying that they wouldn't get unwell because there isn't the money to pay to see a doctor and get good health care. There aren't the jobs. There isn't the livelihood that could support this abundant and prosperous life that we are talking about here. That is not to say that it cannot happen. Solidarity helps to make that happen. Just learning a little about Wales, as I just had some thoughts to share this morning. I learned that you're a nation, or actually you are the first fair trade nation in 2008, and that you have groundbreaking legislation called the Well-Being of Future Generations Act. I like that. I really do like that. Which includes a legal duty to be a globally responsible nation. And that you, just before the COP26 in Glasgow, the Welsh government set out a plan to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2030. So even well beyond the target of 2050, to bring that forward by 20 years. As we speak about solidarity, I want to maybe bring this home to an issue that is very pertinent for the globe and pertinent for Africa, and this is climate justice. Climate change remains the greatest challenge of our generation and for Africa, which is one of the most impacted regions, yet it has contributed, one could say, insignificantly to this phenomenon that threatens the future of the world. Continue with warm, rising temperatures, sea levels rising, extreme weather events, floods, droughts, and the associated devastations. According to the State of the Climate in Africa 2020 report, by 2030, it is estimated that there would be up to 118 million people living in extreme poverty, exposed to drought, floods, and extreme heat if there are not adequate response measures put in place. The issue of climate, which adds to ongoing challenges of poverty, of food insecurity for a continent that literally can feed itself and feed the world. Deterioration with health, with children's school attendance, challenges with that, displacements of people, including from conflicts at community level, where there's scarcity of pasture and of water, the impacts on livelihoods for farmers, for pastoralists, for fisherfolk, We can go on and on about the adverse humanitarian, social, and economic costs of climate change. As governments across the world debate and negotiate around climate change, or around issues of climate, it's quite important that the voice of the African people, the voice of the African governments is heard. African countries need to enhance their capacity for climate resilient development and adaptation. So the issues of climate cannot be separate from the issues of sustainable development for Africa, sustainable and inclusive development for Africa. There are narratives that need to come to the fore from communities, probably even communities on this call, their resilience in the wake of the COVID pandemic, in the wake of climate and how communities are adapting, have adapted. Just to give an example, in Kenya, we know with sand that, I don't know about Wales, but in Kenya, sand is harvested and used in construction, for construction of buildings and other infrastructure like that. But where communities and governments, in this case, county governments, have ensured that the sand is kept on the ground, it has actually been a very important way of absorbing water, so raising the water table in places such as Makueni County in eastern part of the country that's for many years suffered from problems of drought and famine, water scarcity, and women walking for kilometers, many kilometers a day to get water. When you keep the sand in the ground, the water table rises when there is rain, and within a few seasons, that turns from a very dry, arid area into agricultural producing area. Water is available, livestock can get pasture, people can grow crops, they can sell in the market for income, etc., etc. What are we saying here? That there are examples of the resilience of communities beyond vulnerabilities. And of course, where there are vulnerabilities, we need to address those too in solidarity. Post-COVID recovery is a green recovery for Africa. It needs to be one that fosters the resilience and the prosperity of its people. Internationally, in these global negotiations around climate finance, around where's the funding for climate adaptation, the funding for mitigation, etc., etc. It needs to reach the people on the ground. Low carbon and sustainable development, finance and technology, including renewable technologies, renewable energy technologies. It's a scandal that 600 million Africans on the continent don't have access to affordable energy, affordable electricity. Yet the sun shines 365 days a year. And renewable energy technology is now much, much cheaper than fossil fuels. So jobs to be created, food security, trade, etc., etc. As I conclude, let me say that I Googled global solidarity. I wanted to understand what do people mean when we say global solidarity. And you know what? I couldn't find a straightforward definition, which is very telling. And in the end, I settled for, I think this came from the UN, new ways of working together for the common good of all people. As Wales sets out to be a globally responsible nation, I hope that Hub Cymru Africa will set the pace with the depth of true solidarity with the people of Africa in your relationships with the communities with which you have partnerships and the values you espouse. I hope you play the long game that shifts the future of international relations and gives hope for a just, equal world where everyone, irrespective of where they are born in the world, can enjoy a life of peace and prosperity. I thank you. Thanks very much.
Karimi, thank you so much for such an inspirational discussion with us today. I can see there's resounding applause. It's always difficult to speak to a screen and you don't know how people are responding, but I can see through the applause and some of the questions you've been asked today that you really stimulated some important thoughts in the audience. Your emphasis on the climate is something that we really want to push forward. And we know that even people who aren't working in a kind of global or international role are able to make those kind of changes in their daily lives. So thinking local or acting local and thinking global is how we often try to frame it. We've had some questions through from the audience, and as long as you're happy to take them, I'm going to field them to you. We had one from our colleague Kath who asked what solidarity means to you, but you summarised that very well for us at the end of the conversation. So I won't be reflecting on that one. I'm going to take a question from Roger Seddon, who is based in North Wales. And he spoke quite specifically about the 2063 agenda, which I don't think we hear enough about in Wales. We should be responding, as you say, to the future that the African continent wants to set for itself. And if we're to work in partnership, then we should understand what that vision is and how that's going to be enacted. So Roger's asked something quite simple, perhaps, I don't know. I'm sure the complexity will bear out in your answer, but do you think the momentum to absorb the UN Sustainable Development Goals into the 2063 agenda is going fast enough, or are those two frameworks completely separate? Will you give us some more knowledge on that to support our audience to better understand the vision we should be supporting to enact?
Thank you very much for the question. I think the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2063 need to move together. All right. At the end of the day, the Sustainable Development Goals have a shorter time frame, right, to 2030, if I'm right. And so that gives us maybe about 8 years or so. We need to think, why hasn't the world moved faster? This was supposed to be, when it was drafted in 2015, coming out of the Millennium Development Goals, looking at the gaps or the areas that the Millennium Development Goals missed, did not include. The Sustainable Development Goals were supposed to be all-inclusive, all right? And they were also supposed, by all-inclusive, I mean all sectors, everybody, private sector, civil society, government, were supposed to converge around a clear set of goals taking us to 2030. And so the question then becomes, where's the political will for that? Are we going to get to, say, 2025 and then everybody's rushing to show that they've done something for 2030? When it comes to the vision, to the Agenda 2063, this was the Africa Union looking, which started as the Organization of the African Union in 1963. So at the height, if you like, of the political decolonization of African states. That at the 100, and I hope I'm getting my my maths right. Yes, I think so. So kind of 50 years after 1963, at that midpoint, saying 100 years in, what should Africa look like? 2063. And a whole process happened of generating this vision. It sounds long. Probably some of us, many of us, may or may not be around in 2063, but it takes that long-term view to recognize that the issues that are related to economic transformation, that are related to political transformation, that are related to social transformation, don't happen overnight. But you have to have a vision in front of you, and aspirations that rally the African people together towards a goal that is generational, that sets it on the international stage as a competitive force, not as one that is lagging behind, but in some ways, one that is indeed a global force and taking its seat in the global arena alongside others. And so the SDGs and Agenda 2063 do need to work together, but there needs to be a sense of urgency. We may be saying, oh, that's, decades away. That's not for us. No, actually, we set the foundations, and kind of going back to the global solidarity, ways of working differently to build that momentum, to accelerate the process. Why not achieve these aspirations before 2063? What stops us from doing that?
Thank you. Your reflections on intergenerational justice are really important, and thank you also for mentioning the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act that we have here in Wales, which which does aim to achieve that intergenerational justice. But I think it's difficult, and I think we all need to kind of band together to really work on building a vision and a reason for people to be able to consider that intergenerational justice and doing the right thing for people who haven't been born yet, may not be born for a few more generations, and how we build that willingness and that kind of acceptance that we need to take action right now and urgently to ensure we do build that justice for the future. I'm going to give you one more question, if you don't mind, Karimi. We've got a few more minutes, and we've had a question through from Catherine Thomas, who is chair of our Wales and Africa Health Links network. So supports learning and shared learning and health links between Wales and African countries. And Catherine has asked, have you seen changes in the amount of money coming into aid and the way that aid is being done over the last 2 years? I mean, there's been seismic changes globally, but how have they manifested in development and the work that you do? It's a big question.
Thanks very much, Catherine, for your question. I would say, I mean, obviously within the UK, we're still waiting actually to hear what the new international development strategy will be. But we do know that the aid budget was cut from 0.7 to 0.5, and quite drastically. Sorry, there's something that went into my eyes when I'm doing that. So I would say, in the context of development aid, certainly from the UK, in the way that maybe has been shared before, no, there hasn't been an increase in aid. I think in other ways, certainly for humanitarian situations, that money has been coming through official development aid, certainly with the Disaster Emergencies Committee, DEC, for areas like Afghanistan, a bit with South Sudan, etc., etc. The IMF released in 2020, I believe, what's called the special drawing rights. So this was in many ways a blank check that all members of the IMF received. I wish I had the numbers with you so that you would see how much the UK received from the SDRs compared to the whole of Africa and compared to individual countries in Africa. All right? I think that is telling, is very telling of just how those inequities are. At a time when African governments are really, really struggling. They couldn't, just talking about health, for example. We know that universal health coverage is not enjoyed by probably all African countries, certainly most African countries. I know there are a few like Kenya where there is the national insurance, National Health Insurance Fund that is beginning to show what is possible for people in receiving healthcare, affordable healthcare. But for the most part, that is out of pocket healthcare. Our African governments, and I'm trying to think if there is any that out of its own domestic revenue, so tax, can finance the health infrastructure, can finance, provide good pay for doctors, for nurses, for other health workers, the infrastructure, the medicines without aid. There are very few, if any. Maybe South Africa. It would be good to know how much South Africa is able to finance its own healthcare for its people, or why it requires, like others, very aid dependent. And that's not right. It's not right that for African countries and African governments not to be able to provide some certain basic services, such as healthcare, for its people, so that those who are most marginalized don't have to rely on out-of-pocket, but they can go to a health facility close by where they live and get good health care.
Thank you. It's, what you're saying for me makes me think of the important kind of mantra that we try and pin our work onto, which is it's justice, not aid or charity. Like, what we do should be anchored in addressing inequality and delivering justice, not kind of operating in a charity where people have to become uncertain or unsure or not know or have a stable hold on what might be coming for them in the future. And I think listening to what you're saying about things like the IMF and those kind of massive systemic inequalities that are kind of baked into the system almost, the work that small organisations in Wales do is important, and it makes those hyper-local changes, and it can make a difference to the lives of people. But it's important to always have your eye on the systemic and the big stuff as well. And being a responsible global citizen is surely kind of calling for changes in those systems as well, and making sure we're doing the small and we're doing the large as well to kind of get these issues to the surface. There aren't any more questions in the box other than some people who've been enlightened today to hear about the 2063 agenda, which we will share some information about hopefully after the conference. We'll aim to send out an information pack, so we'll be mindful to include that to people who've registered. I don't know if you want to make any final remarks before I kind of wrap up the session. You have spoken a lot though, so no pressure to think of anything else. But if there's anything else you wanted to leave us with, we'd love to hear it.
Just to say thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. I loved the interaction through the questions. I'm sure there are many more, and certainly more give and take, if you like, in dialogue. I'm glad that people are interested in Vision 2063. Unfortunately, it's not well known. That again comes back to, where are the narratives, isn't it? Where are the aspirations? What do we rally around? But I'm really, really impressed with the work that you all do. And thank you, Claire, and everyone for this invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karimi. We really appreciate you speaking to us today. And it's been such an important discussion to kick off the rest of the conference. I think it sets the tone, and I think it gives us things to consider when we're participating over the next few days. Mary, who is head of Wales, is also on the conference today, and she's available presumably by direct message to hear more about the work of Christian Aid in Wales. And we also, Karimi also mentioned the work of DEC. We have a new colleague in Wales, Sian, who is also participating in the conference over the next couple of days. So that's Disasters Emergency Committee. So there's plenty of participants from kind of small and local charities, and we've also got some of the bigger INGOs participating in the call over the next couple of days. So I hope there's opportunity to learn from each other and opportunities to kind of make the most of the social lounges. When I finish this session, you'll all be thrown out onto the platform where there's tables where you can take part in networking, you can speak to each other, you can speak to other members of the Hub Cymru Africa team. I am going to finish the session in a second, but just for context, for those of you who haven't used an AirMeet platform before, when we end a session, you will just go into the shared area and you can make use of that as you like. You can just leave your platform running in the background, and as soon as we start a session, you'll be pulled back onto the main stage. So this is the main stage that we're on at the moment. So if you just have the platform running in the background, when we start the session, you'll automatically rejoin it. So there's no need to clock watch or worry about keeping timings. So I'm going to end the session now. I'm going to wish you all a good couple of days participating in this work. The next session begins at 10:30, so we've got about 35 minutes, and we'll be discussing what global solidarity means, how Wales can build a vision for global solidarity. Some of the discussions we want to have is that solidarity is a word that has lots of meaning attached to it, and we all bring our own definitions, and we want to hear what those definitions are. We want to hear what solidarity looks like when you enact solidarity. We want to hear about what your barriers might be, or why you feel like it's hard to act in solidarity sometimes, because here at Hub Cymru Africa, we want to be able to support you to move forward positively. So I'm going to finish session. I'm known for rambling on, particularly when I can't see anybody's faces, and just speak to myself. But thank you for joining this morning. Thanks again to Karimi, and thanks to Mary. It's Wales Christian Aid as well for supporting the organising of this session, and see you all across the couple of days.